The story takes place in Washington, D.C., during an intense election season, with James Carrington fighting for re-election. D.C., filled with power and ambition, is a fitting backdrop for the senator's secretive and risky actions. Carrington's campaign is in full swing, and he's balancing public events with his hidden private life. He and Rachel meet in secret, away from the public eye, taking great risks to keep their relationship under wraps. James Carrington is a well-known senator in his mid-40s with a reputation for promoting family values. He is charismatic and admired by the public, with a picture-perfect family life. However, underneath this image, James is a fiercely ambitious man who will do anything to keep his power and reputation intact. While people see him as an honest family man, he's hiding a darker, more ruthless side. Rachel Saunders, 30 years old, is an ambitious campaign manager known for rescuing struggling political campaigns. She's smart, intense, and dedicated to her work, spending countless hours helping Carrington stay in the public's good graces. Over the years, her loyalty to him has evolved into a secret affair, despite knowing the risks. Rachel is caught between her career ambitions and her deep, dangerous attraction to the senator. Margaret Carrington, James's wife, is a graceful woman from an influential family, known for her charity work. She has been married to James for 20 years and has supported his career. Recently, she senses that something isn't right in her marriage. James seems distant, often working late, and Margaret begins to suspect he may be hiding something, though she lacks proof. With the election campaign intensifying, Senator James Carrington is feeling the pressure. Every decision counts, every public appearance matters, and every moment must be carefully managed to sway voters. James is determined to maintain his influence and power, knowing that any misstep could cost him his seat in the Senate. The stakes are higher than ever, and his ambition pushes him to rely heavily on Rachel Saunders, his brilliant campaign manager. Rachel becomes more than just an advisor. She's his closest confidant, the only person he can trust to understand his struggles and the demands of his public life. She encourages him, strategizes with him, and even manages his mood swings when the pressure seems too much. Their bond strengthens as they spend late nights working together, sharing intimate conversations about life, politics, and their future visions. Over time, their connection goes beyond professional respect, growing into an unspoken attraction neither of them acknowledges until it's too strong to ignore. As the campaign days bleed into nights, James and Rachel often find themselves alone in the dimly lit campaign office or in rented hotel suites for strategy sessions. With each long night, their conversations grow more personal. One evening, after hours of intense discussion and a few too many drinks, James reaches out, brushing Rachel's hand. This brief, electrifying touch opens the door to a passion they've both been suppressing. Their relationship soon becomes a full-blown affair, kept strictly under wraps. They meet in secret, exchanging hurried glances and coded messages. During meetings, they sit close but act as if they're merely colleagues. Outside the office, they sneak off for quick, stolen moments in hidden corners of Washington, D.C., careful to avoid familiar places. Each encounter fuels their passion, but also their paranoia. Any slip could ruin them both. Small signs of their intimacy begin to surface, and though they're cautious, the thrill of secrecy makes them bold, occasionally letting their guard down in small but noticeable ways. At home, Margaret Carrington begins to feel the strain on her marriage. James is working late more frequently, returning home exhausted and distant. She tries to convince herself it's the demands of the campaign, but nagging doubts creep into her mind. She starts to notice subtle but unsettling changes, suspicious late-night calls, unexplained text messages, and James's habit of checking his phone with a nervous intensity. He's evasive when she asks about his work, and he dismisses her concerns, brushing them off as mere paranoia. Margaret's suspicions grow stronger each time she sees his strange behavior, but she's torn between her doubts and her desire to keep their family intact. Rather than confront him outright, she chooses to wait and watch, hoping she's imagining things. For now, she pushes aside her intuition and clings to the belief that James is the faithful husband she's always known. Unbeknownst to her, her quiet observations are beginning to reveal cracks in James's carefully constructed image, setting the stage for a confrontation neither of them can avoid. One morning, as Rachel goes through her mail at her apartment, she notices a plain, unmarked envelope. Inside is a single sheet of paper with a typed message: "End your affair with the senator, or everyone will know." Rachel's blood runs cold. She reads and rereads the words, her heart pounding as she tries to figure out who might have sent it. Could someone have followed her and James? Could an employee have overheard something? The vagueness of the threat heightens her panic, making her question everyone around her. Rachel becomes increasingly paranoid, feeling watched everywhere she goes. She begins to see potential threats in every small interaction, becoming hyper-alert to anyone who might be observing her and James. Each time her phone rings, she hesitates before answering, worried it might be someone calling to blackmail her. This shadow of fear, coupled with the guilt of their affair, overwhelms her, but she knows she can't handle this alone. After agonizing over it for days, Rachel decides to tell James about the threatening note. She meets him in a secluded corner of his campaign office, after hours, clutching the crumpled paper. Her voice trembles as she explains, her worst fears spilling out. She worries about how much someone might know and what it could mean for his campaign. James, initially calm, reads the note and dismisses her fear with a reassuring smile, telling her that it's likely just a random prank by a disgruntled opponent's team. But deep down, James isn't nearly as composed as he appears. The note rattles him. The thought of his secret affair becoming public is a nightmare scenario that could end his career, tear his family apart, and ruin his image forever. He reassures Rachel, telling her not to worry, that no one would dare risk their career by trying to expose him. Yet, after they part, James can't shake a growing sense of dread. Each day, he becomes more paranoid, snapping at his staff, scanning every conversation for hints of suspicion, and obsessing over who might know the truth. Margaret has been piecing things together, even as she's tried to ignore the signs. James's late-night work hours, the strange looks he and Rachel share, and now, the whispers and glances among his staff that she occasionally catches, everything begins to add up. One evening, unable to suppress her suspicions any longer, Margaret decides to follow him. She waits until he leaves the house, trailing behind in her car at a safe distance. As she watches him head to a discreet hotel, she feels her stomach twist with dread. She parks nearby and waits in silence. Soon, she sees Rachel enter the lobby, looking around nervously before heading upstairs. Hours pass, and Margaret waits, her heart sinking as she struggles to keep her emotions in check. Eventually, she catches a glimpse of James and Rachel exiting together, sharing a brief, intimate moment as they laugh quietly in the dimly lit lobby. Heartbroken and enraged, Margaret confronts James the next day at home. She barely holds back tears as she accuses him, laying out everything she saw. James, cornered and panicked, denies everything, claiming that she misunderstood, insisting his closeness to Rachel is due to campaign stress and long work hours. He tries to manipulate the conversation, deflecting and shifting the blame, but Margaret's resolve is unbreakable. She no longer believes his excuses. Determined to protect herself and her family's reputation, she begins to plot her next move, deciding that something must be done to end this betrayal once and for all. Determined to regain control of her life and protect her family's reputation, Margaret decides she needs to confront Rachel directly. She knows this conversation must be private, away from prying eyes and ears. One afternoon, she requests a meeting with Rachel under the guise of discussing campaign strategy. When they're alone, in a quiet, upscale cafe, Margaret's demeanor shifts from polite to steely. With a calm, yet menacing tone, she reveals that she knows all about the affair, watching Rachel's face turn pale as her secret is laid bare. Margaret doesn't waste time with accusations. Instead, she delivers a sharp ultimatum: end this now, or you will face consequences. She makes it clear that she's willing to go to any lengths to protect her family's image and her husband's career, even if it means exposing the affair and destroying Rachel's reputation in the process. Rachel, visibly shaken, realizes the gravity of the threat. The power dynamics shift as Margaret reclaims control. Fearing the repercussions, Rachel reluctantly agrees to Margaret's terms, feeling trapped and cornered. She nods in submission, knowing that crossing Margaret is too dangerous. Later that evening, Rachel confronts James, recounting her tense meeting with Margaret and explaining the ultimatum. Her voice trembles with anger and frustration as she demands answers, wanting to know where she stands. James is taken aback, caught between shock and resentment toward Margaret's boldness. He tries to calm Rachel, insisting that this is just a temporary setback and that he'll handle his wife after the election is over. Their conversation quickly escalates into an argument as Rachel accuses him of putting his political ambitions above their relationship. James, equally frustrated, tells her that this isn't the time to make drastic moves. He promises Rachel that after securing the election, they can figure out a way to continue their relationship. But for now, he insists, they need to keep a low profile and avoid any public scandal that could ruin his career. This promise, though intended to reassure Rachel, only leaves her feeling used and discarded, fueling her doubts about his loyalty to her. The ultimatum, combined with the intense political climate, begins to take a toll on James. At campaign events, he becomes more erratic, distracted, and tense. The demands of the election and his hidden double life weigh heavily on him, causing him to snap at colleagues, make careless remarks, and act distant with supporters. His campaign team notices these uncharacteristic behaviors, attributing them to the pressures of the election. But Rachel knows the real reason behind his unraveling composure. Rachel, on the other hand, grows increasingly resentful and bitter. She feels betrayed by James's decision to temporarily end their affair and is haunted by Margaret's threat. Her feelings of love and admiration for him start to sour, replaced by anger and bitterness, as she questions whether he ever truly cared for her or if she was just another asset in his political game. With each passing day, she feels more sidelined, and her patience wears thin. The tension between them becomes palpable, a ticking time bomb that threatens to explode as the election draws near. As James juggles his wife's demands, Rachel's resentment, and the mounting pressure of the campaign, he becomes consumed by paranoia, fearful that his career and reputation could collapse at any moment. This volatile mix of betrayal, jealousy, and ambition sets the stage for the tragedy to come as each character edges closer to the breaking point. One cold morning, the news breaks that Rachel Saunders has been found dead in her apartment. The initial report from local authorities states that her death appears to be the result of a drug overdose. Empty pill bottles are found scattered across her kitchen counter, and the scene looks like a tragic but unremarkable overdose, perhaps the result of a personal struggle. the media quickly labels it as a sad, unfortunate ending to the promising career of a brilliant campaign manager. However, Detective Sarah Thompson, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, is assigned to the case. As she examines the scene, she begins to notice several inconsistencies that don't add up. For one, the pills found in Rachel's apartment are prescription medications, but they don't match the standard dosages or medications typically associated with overdoses. Additionally, the way Rachel's body is positioned and the lack of typical overdose signs, like a history of substance abuse, strikes Thompson as odd. Most concerning of all is the faint smell of a strange chemical in the air, suggesting that something more sinister might have taken place. Detective Thompson's gut tells her this was no suicide, and she begins to suspect foul play. She orders further investigation into Rachel's personal and professional life, focusing on her close ties to James Carrington and the possibility of a cover-up. As Thompson digs deeper, she uncovers a web of deceit, lies, and hidden motives pointing toward a chilling conclusion. Someone may have orchestrated Rachel's death to keep the affair and the political scandal from being exposed. When James hears the news of Rachel's death, he is devastated. He tries to hold himself together in public, attending a press conference where he mourns Rachel's passing, calling it a tragic loss and offering his condolences to her family. His voice quivers with emotion, but his eyes are hollow, betraying a growing unease. Behind closed doors, however, James is falling apart. The pressure is mounting, and the fear of being implicated in her death consumes him. He feels the walls closing in on him as he is faced with the reality that his affair and the dangerous secrecy surrounding it might be exposed in the worst possible way. James becomes increasingly erratic and paranoid. He locks himself in his office for hours, reviewing every detail of the investigation, looking for any sign that might point to him or his involvement. He even considers fleeing, wondering if he could run away from the consequences of his actions. But deep down, he knows that the political and public fallout would follow him wherever he went. The weight of Rachel's death hangs over him, a constant reminder of how far he's fallen and the danger his secrets now pose. His public mourning feels hollow to those around him. People begin to notice that his grief seems more like an act, something he is putting on for the cameras. His behavior becomes more erratic, his speech is less coherent, and his judgment clouded. Every time a phone rings or a knock echoes at his door, he flinches, expecting news that the investigation is closing in on him. In stark contrast to James's public breakdown, Margaret seems almost unnervingly calm in the aftermath of Rachel's death. At first glance, she appears to be deeply saddened by the loss, publicly grieving and holding a memorial service for Rachel, calling her a brilliant and loyal member of our team. She stands beside James in every public appearance, showing solidarity with her husband and supporting the political narrative of the senator's tragic loss. However, those closest to Margaret start to notice something unsettling in her behavior. While she outwardly mourns Rachel, her demeanor behind closed doors is strangely detached, even cold. She spends an unusual amount of time on the phone with her lawyer, discussing matters that seem out of place for someone who is supposed to be grieving. Friends and colleagues begin to whisper among themselves, sensing that there's something off about Margaret's calmness. It's as if, beneath the surface, she knows more than she's letting on. As the days pass, Margaret's calmness becomes more pronounced, and it begins to look less like the grief of a heartbroken wife and more like the satisfaction of someone who has gotten exactly what they wanted. To the outside world, Margaret is a grieving widow. To those who know her best, her strange sense of composure feels like the calm before a storm. She is no longer just the wife of a powerful politician. she's a woman who may have found a way to rid herself of the very person who threatened her carefully constructed world. Detective Sarah Thompson begins looking into Rachel's death after it seems too suspicious to be an accidental overdose. She starts by investigating Rachel's personal life and finds out about the affair between Rachel and James Carrington. This affair quickly becomes the main lead, as it gives a clear motive for murder. Detective Thompson interviews people who were close to Rachel and James, including James's campaign staff, friends, and even James's wife, Margaret. As she digs deeper, she finds that there were growing tensions between James and Rachel. Rachel had been frustrated by James's indecision about ending the affair. It becomes clear that James's secret life is about to be exposed, and Detective Thompson wonders who would want Rachel silenced. Thompson focuses on Margaret, James's wife, sensing that she might know more than she's letting on. Margaret's behavior becomes a key focus in the investigation, and Detective Thompson begins to piece together the events that led to Rachel's death. The investigation takes a major turn when Detective Thompson discovers surveillance footage showing Margaret entering Rachel's apartment shortly before Rachel was found dead. This evidence makes Thompson believe that Margaret might have confronted Rachel, which could have led to a violent situation. Further investigation reveals that Margaret seemed calm and almost unaffected by Rachel's death, which raises even more suspicions. She publicly mourns Rachel's loss, but doesn't show the typical signs of grief. Margaret's phone records also show calls to James just before she entered Rachel's apartment, which suggests that James might have been involved in some way. This evidence points to Margaret possibly being involved in Rachel's death, either because of the affair or a confrontation that got out of hand. As news of the affair breaks out, the public turns against James. His career and reputation as a trusted politician fall apart. He resigns from his position as senator, unable to handle the pressure. The scandal not only ruins his career, but also destroys his marriage, as his affair is exposed for the world to see. Despite resigning, James's life doesn't get any better. Detective Thompson continues to investigate, and it becomes clear that the affair, along with the murder, will have lasting consequences for James and his family. His political career is finished, and his personal life is in shambles. The police arrest Margaret, James's wife, for Rachel's murder. During the trial, it's revealed that Margaret poisoned Rachel. Her reason for doing this was to save her marriage and protect James's career. Margaret thought that if Rachel's affair with James continued, it would destroy everything she had worked for. So, in her mind, killing Rachel was the only way to keep her life together and protect her family's reputation. As the affair and murder become public knowledge, James's image as a respected politician is completely ruined. People now see him as a hypocrite, someone who preached family values but betrayed his wife and hurt others. His career falls apart, and he loses everything he worked for. More than the scandal, James feels guilty about Rachel's death and the role he played in it. Even though he's not charged with the murder, he can't escape the shame of what happened. In a surprising twist, it's revealed that before her death, Rachel made an audio recording where she explained everything. In the recording, Rachel talks about the affair with James, how she was treated, and the pain she felt. She explains that she was caught between wanting more from James and the guilt of betraying Margaret. The recording is made public after the trial, and it leaves people wondering whether Margaret acted on her own or if James played a bigger role in what happened to Rachel. The public is now divided. Some believe James was just as guilty as Margaret, while others feel sorry for him, thinking Margaret was the real villain. The case is officially over, but the truth about who was really to blame is still unclear.